But in the real world, you can do the work, you can crush the assignment, you can kill the project. But if you don't scream at the top of your lungs and make sure everybody is perceiving that you did all of this, there's a chance that you won't be seen. There is also a chance you won't be given credit, and there's an even bigger chance that someone might take the credit from you. All right, Lil T. Today, we are going to talk about performance reviews. So performance reviews are basically just formal evaluations that you're going to have with your manager, and they will assess strengths, weaknesses, maybe share some areas to improve. A lot of the times it's a structured conversation, and it's really focused on aligning your goals with the company's expectations and making sure you're making progress in your job. Mm-hmm. So kind of like how you get report cards at school where you get grades and you get feedback and there's guidance from your teachers. It's basically the same idea, but in a corporate setting. And sometimes it ends with a salary adjustment, which we always love. So companies conduct performance reviews for a multitude of reasons. A lot of the times it's really just like your basic, it's a standard part of managing people. You do it to assess contributions and growth, provide constructive feedback and career advice. Sometimes it's about aligning like personal development with the career goals. Some companies have like budgets for you to invest in developing skills. And so they might try to like, use this meeting to align those skills developments with what the companies are going. And then of course, it's also to determine potential raises, promotions, and role adjustments. So every company is different. We're going to talk about raises and promotions in the next episode, but every company handles these differently. And another big reason why companies conduct performance reviews is to determine who to fire. Or more importantly, if they're doing a layoff, sometimes you see like performance-based layoffs, which we'll talk about as well in a later episode. But basically, a lot of that comes down to these performance reviews and how you've been tracking with the company up until then. So a typical performance review follows a few structures. Some of these are give or take, but basically you have like a self-assessment. This is where you reflect on your own work and you submit a self-evaluation. In some companies, they'll do peer assessments. If you have a really collaborative job or have a lot of projects where you work with other individuals, other managers, other peers, anybody else, they might have your peers share feedback just because your manager is not spending every single minute with you. And so they want to get other people's perspectives because you spend more time working with them. Then, of course, you have your manager's feedback. And then you kind of have different sections in it. So you're going to have like big strengths and wins. Wins are just things you accomplished. So I always recommend to people to keep a running list of things that they've accomplished and done at all times, just no matter where you're at, because you could use it for a resume. You could use it for your LinkedIn. You can use it in these conversations. Then you're going to have areas of improvement. These are things you're doing maybe well or not so well, and they just want you to grow. Then you'll have some goal settings. So you discuss future goals, maybe potential new projects and general career growth. And then, of course, if you did great, if the company budgets align, you start discussing other compensations or promotions. Mm-hmm. Have you had a review yet? Have you been given feedback in your role?
We're supposed to, but we don't do that.
Yeah, that is more common than you think. In my career, I didn't have a professional review until 7 years into it, 8 years into it. Honestly, even when I did internships, they didn't give very much feedback.
Yeah, it's not like when they've written up and like actually took time doing, they'll like just kind of like pull me aside or they'll say something specific. It's never just like, like an actual like sit down conversation. It's just them being like, oh, awesome day. Good job. And then that's kind of it. Like it's literally just like one-on-one with maybe like SLT or the store manager.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's common too, right? Like those feedback.
It's literally just like sitting in the break room talk. Well, like I'm sitting back there drinking my drink and they're like, you're doing so awesome today, Tara. I'm like,
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's better than having the opposite of that, which is where people want to have formal conversations with you. Like, I didn't have a performance review my entire career because there was really nothing to work on, let's say, and my managers were lazy. There was really nothing to like work on, and so, you know, it wasn't like a huge necessity. A lot of the times performance reviews can be formal ways to just like address growing issues. Okay. So there are handfuls of review types. Typically, the most common one is you have annual reviews. So it's a formal evaluation at the end of the year. It covers all of the work since you've joined. Companies handle this differently. Some companies have, like large companies like, I don't know, Microsoft. They have schedules where they like have a review season, they have a promotion and bonus season, like they have all of these specific time periods where they address these. In more of a startup environment, like when I used to run annual reviews, I would do it based on truly like from the moment a team member started. So if they started in January, then their annual review would be in January, and vice versa, you know, if they started later in the month. But a lot of companies, like I said, you may start in June and they do annual reviews in January. So you only get a partial review for your first one. Then you have, of course, like shorter time periods, quarterly, maybe semi-annual reviews, or just check-ins tied to your review. These are, I would definitely say, less common. Maybe if you're in an internship or like an apprentice role, there might be more performance review, let's say, frequency, but typically your overarching performance review is a year, just because you can only accomplish so much in 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Then, you know, we talked about onboarding. There's that first 90 days. Sometimes you're going to have a probationary review, which is like at the end of that first 90 days, they're going to give you feedback. Are you a fit? Is it going well? You know, do I want to keep working with you, like that? What you mentioned, which is probably the most common type, I think, of performance reviews, is just ongoing and informal feedback. So it's like a regular conversation, a casual conversation where your manager is just going to be like, I like what you did, or this was great, this was not so great. And it just depends. And then, of course, you have project-based reviews. So sometimes if you work at, like, for example, a consulting firm, you can get reviews and feedback at the end of each project from like your peers. You can get it from the person who is leading that project, and it kind of just tallies up. Then you have a 360 review. So this is typically when you're in like a middle management or leadership position, and basically they ask everyone. So they're going to ask peers, managers, subordinates, and even sometimes they'll ask your clients. And the whole idea is to provide a holistic view of your performance and in general your workplace behavior. I've mostly seen annual reviews in my time. Once I got up into more leadership roles, it was definitely like 360 reviews were a little bit more common. And then, of course, you just have peer reviews. So some of this is more usually tied into whatever the larger company review is. But I've seen before where you can, for example, like provide positive feedback to a company on a peer, and then they can get like a Starbucks gift card because they were so helpful or they did something.
That's
for
fire.
You. Yeah.
I like that method. That's a good method.
I know. Well, I know. I never worked at a company with one, but I have seen companies where you can like send, you know, small little gifts. They have like businesses built around doing this. Okay, so getting into the formats of reviews. There are a couple different formats. Typically, the most common one is just written evaluations. So your company will provide like a list of culture beliefs, a list of descriptions from your job, like for you. What do you say? Like being nice to customers, bedside manner is a big one for you in your job, right? So there's going to be this whole assessment with predetermined values, and then get assessed against each of those. All right, that's the most common.
Right.
Then you have scorecard-based reviews. This is where you're rated on specific KPIs. So, for example, when I ran a team that managed technical tickets, one of the KPIs that this team had was the average time to close a ticket, right?
What's a KPI?
So, KPI is a key performance indicator. You're going to hear that word a lot. So just like engrave that in your head. KPIs, key performance indicators. Then you have OKRs. Do you know what OKRs are?
No.
Objectives and key results.
Wow.
Same. People love using them. They're great.
Awesome.
So anyways, I had a technical team, right? And one of the things we would look at was the average time to close tickets. Because if your average time to close tickets was, 3 times the length of your peers, obviously there's something we should be working on here. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Then you have more narrative reviews. So I've seen this before where you kind of ask like generally broad questions. Hey, what have you worked on with Kiana? How great was she? Yada, 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 any feedback? And then they just like write a paragraph for you. Not necessarily a specific rating system, not necessarily a specific, let's say like action or culture or company point that they're assessing, but really just more like, what do you think of Kiana?
She's awesome.
You have... Okay, little T.
Correct answer?
I mean, it sounds fake coming
I'm
from you.
being nice. I'm being nice.
All right, well, let's see how long it lasts.
Okay.
Then you have competency-based reviews. So sometimes this is where you can just have like assessments on your specific skills. I've never really seen this before. I think I've seen some people do some coding stuff, but usually this is handled outside of reviews. But you can kind of think of it as like you get certified in something. So if you're certified in something, it obviously shows your competency. This is a similar idea. Then you have, one-on-one discussions. So sometimes there may not be a written out document. Red flag, by the way. But anyways, if there is no written out document, right? Sometimes you just talk with each other. Talking's great. Feedback's casual. You get it. I think the big thing is when you have all your feedback verbally and you kind of don't have time to take notes, you don't have time to write anything down. So it can be really hard to like digest and process it. Mm-hmm. And then in some companies, there's software-based stuff that they have where there's like HR tools that people use that basically can track performance and feedback over time. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you have different review methods. So this is basically just how you score yourself. So you have like the ranking method where employees are ranked against each other based on their performance. So basically, if you have a team of 5, you put worst performer at the bottom and best performer at the top. This can get really tricky because obviously you can have a really, really high performing team and your worst performer is still probably better than most other teams' best performer. Mm-hmm. Then you have a rating scale method. This is just where employees are rated on a quick and easy scale, 1 to 5, or maybe it's something like meets expectations, super meets expectations, exceeds expectations. A Likert scale, basically. Then you have a checklist method. So let's say there's like a list of desired behaviors and, I don't know, mannerisms that you're expected to have on the job. This might be just something that they check off. You have it, you don't have it. Mm-hmm. Then sometimes you can have like certain objectives or goals that you set with your manager in a previous review, and those can also be used for an assessment. So like, did you accomplish finishing this training course? Did you accomplish collaborating with this team? Did you accomplish any of that? That could be another form of ranking your success. Mm-hmm. Then you have critical incident method, which is basically just where you record really positive or really negative incidents over the course of a year and you outline kind of each of the specific actions. As I mentioned before, a 360-degree feedback is going to collect from multiple sources. It's going to use multiple tactics. It's going to have ranking. It's going to have open form. It's going to have all kinds of different things. So a lot of different pieces. And then, of course, you have like binary systems where it's just yes, no, did they do this? Did they not do this? Did they accomplish this? Are they meeting goals? Yes, no type thing like that. So overall, pretty simple. But it's just like if you imagine grading a test, it's kind of the same vibe. Yeah. There's a lot of ways you could respond to a test. There's a lot of ways you could grade a test. It's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, I think the one thing, as I mentioned before, is that performance reviews should always be somewhat formal. There should always be some documentation, even if it's small. I think if you have a performance review, like let's say you're going into your annual performance review and your manager isn't able to provide you any documentation at all, even if the company doesn't have any kind of standard operating procedures and they don't have any standard documentation, it ultimately just shows like they don't really care about you in that sense.
Yeah.
And sure, they may not know what they're doing, but even when I didn't know what I was doing, I would ask other people what they were doing. You know, I would find ways because I wanted to make sure my team knew their feedback. And so bottom line is they're not great as a manager in terms of experience and in terms of how they're investing into your future. So just remember, like, it should be a little formal. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be fully baked out, but there definitely should be something that you walk away with and you can reference back to in regards to the feedback you got. So, all right, little T, boss POV. I've given many reviews. I have given so many more reviews than I have received in my career. And I don't know if that's because I've just had crappy bosses my whole life or if I've just been such a performer. They just don't say much. Could be. But I had so many great employees. Could be all of the, I mean, I definitely had crappy bosses. So, I mean, I know that one's a check. If we were going down, if we were doing the list of behaviors, not providing performance reviews, check. Not providing feedback, check. Yeah, all that. But I think, you know, realistically, like a annual review or any of these reviews, they're kind of a pain in the butt, not going to lie. It's a lot of paperwork. Like as a boss, it can be a lot. Now, it's not something that just because it's paperwork and stuff you shouldn't care about and you shouldn't invest in. Like I said, I spent a lot of time doing this stuff with my team or for my team. But I think for a lot of people, it can be one, little challenging. Like I've had cases before where I was supposed to give somebody an annual review because they had been at the company for over a year. But I myself had only managed them for 4 months. So I was like, listen, I can't give you an annual review because I literally have only managed you for 4 months. Now you've been here for a year. And I think that there's a way where we could combine feedback from other teams, but I can't give you an annual review in this role, right? And I think there's a lot of gray area. And when you work at a company that's a little bit more on the startup side, a lot of these things aren't defined. But as a boss, I would always I think because I had such bad experiences myself, I always wanted to do 100 times better. So when I would run it, I would have feedback from peers just because I know I have a bias. Like I don't see everything my employees worked on. I don't micromanage. So it's hard for me to know everything they've accomplished or how they work well with others. But then I would also kind of encourage my team to fill out these templates, and I would give my team the templates well in advance because I wanted them to be able to start tracking what they did successfully throughout the year, what they accomplished, and all of these things. But you know, it is a little bit of a formality. It can really suck if you have a bad employee and you have to give a lot of negative feedback. It can be I've had review sessions before where every single point was below expectation. And delivering those is not fun. Right. But I did do my job because it wasn't a surprise. Right? It shouldn't be a surprise. This feedback goes on all year, and then you bring it together at the end of it to really kind of formalize everything that you've said throughout the year. Because I think the idea is, let's say that you slapped a customer. All right, now, let's say you slapped them on the hand, because I think if you actually slapped them, you'd get fired immediately. So slapped on the hand because they tried to grab something. Yeah, right. We're going to try to avoid assault. But let's say you slapped a customer on the hand. Your manager might pull you aside immediately and be like, hey, little T, you can't push people's hands away from you. You just can't be doing that, right? And they should be doing that throughout the year. Now, a bad manager would say nothing, wait till the annual review and be like, hey, you're getting fired or you're being put on a PIP because you slapped somebody's hand.
You know, I've had to do that before.
Slap a hand?
Not hard, but I moved it out of the way. Yeah, she tried to reach over the register.
Yeah.
And grab out the bag. And I was like, I had to push her hand away.
All right.
Because I was like, can we not reach over the cash register when the cash drawer is open? You're going to get me fired.
All right then. So To my point, let's say you handled that in a not so great way and the customer screamed. Your manager might pull you aside and be like, hey, little T, let's handle other people's hands with more care. Versus, there is also when you do really good things, right? Hey, little T, you supported that customer so amazing. Like right now, all the little notes of feedback that your team gives you, right? If you got an annual review in a couple months, it's not like you're going to be super surprised, like, oh my God, what is this? Right?
Yeah.
Because you've been getting these little nuggets of feedback along the way. So,
yeah,
I think your boss is definitely not a big fan of the reviews just as much as you, because it's a lot of paperwork. And a lot of times when you're a manager, you have a lot more employees. So for the one review that your employee does, you have to do 7.
Yeah, that's a lot for just a part-time job.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, true that. I mean, for me, that's why I liked being able to stagger my annual reviews to when people started, because I didn't have all like 10 of them all at once, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, let's go into mentality check and let's start talking about, how we view something is going to change how we approach it. And I think with performance reviews, there's so many misconceptions, but I think I'm going to focus on the 2 biggest ones. Number 1 is if I keep my head down and do the work, I'll be rewarded. And my manager knows, right, what I'm working on. This is super wrong for a multitude of reasons. All right. I think this is what the world conditions us to believe, right? School conditions you. It's like you go to school, you do the project, you do the assignment, you get a good grade, you move on. Hooray, hurrah.
Yeah.
But in the real world, you can do the work, you can crush the assignment, you can kill the project. But if you don't scream at the top of your lungs and make sure everybody is perceiving that you did all of this, there's a chance that you won't be seen. There is also a chance you won't be given credit, and there's an even bigger chance that someone might take the credit from you. And this is where we get it. Yeah, it's shady, but it's one of the biggest mistakes I made in my career was I trusted that my manager was on the same team as me, and actually we were on very opposite teams. So I thought he would just naturally, let's say, acknowledge and support all of the things I was doing. And sure, in many cases there was praise, there was credit, and all of this other stuff. But because I wasn't pushing my own agenda and talking about everything I did on a larger scale to the founder of the company, to the rest of leadership, to everyone else, because I wasn't doing a good enough job of that, he was able to kind of control my perception to the rest of the business. And so why is this wrong? Well, yeah, red flag, right? Well, okay, so it assumes that you're automatically going to be perceived as you want without controlling the narrative, which, as I just said, super wrong. You can't necessarily control how you are perceived at any given time, right? But if you're quiet and you just do all the work, you give other people room to lead that perception and to make sure that other people can believe whatever they want. Another thing is managers are juggling multiple people and multiple priorities. So if you don't highlight your achievements and your accomplishments and everything you've done, it's a good chance they might get overlooked, right? Bring receipts, brag a little bit about everything you've been doing. Because even the best managers can miss some of your wins if you don't talk about them. And that kind of goes into the last chat we had on one-on-ones, right? When you're having little wins as you're ongoing, you should be bringing those up every week, every time you accomplish something great, right? And so what's the right action? Well, the right mentality is that you need to self-advocate, right? Documentation wins, and you need to make sure that you can talk about all of your achievements clearly and repetitively because people always don't remember things. So repeat. There's a lot of people in a company, right? If you were the one who designed this club, let's say, or maybe you threw a happy hour that was really successful for the business. If you don't talk about it to at least 50% of the people that you have in your immediate purview, there's 0% chance anybody knows.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to talk about it.
Yeah.
So how can we take action here? Well, number one thing is keep a brag file or a list of accomplishments. This can be as simple as a notes document that you just add onto little wins. big wins, doesn't really matter. Anything that you think would be a little bit of a brag you want to highlight. And then regularly share this stuff during your one-on-ones, so that way you start to really accumulate a large list. I used to beg my employees to do this. One, because it is great for these conversations to have it already outlined, and you forget things, right? Everybody forgets things. Like the customer's hand you slap, you're going to remember that forever. But all of the customers you successfully helped and all of the customers you delighted, you're probably not going to remember every single one of those. Right? We have a huge propensity to remember negative things more than positive things. So
I
that's
don't
one.
remember anything.
All right, little T. Well, then you definitely need to keep a record file. I think that's the big takeaway here for you.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think the other reason too is by keeping a list of everything you've accomplished, you basically tee up your resume or any type of adjustments you need. You just have it all written out already, and you can plug and play what you need. So this is just like an incredible thing to just keep at all frickin' times.
Yeah.
All right. A misconception number 2 is that all feedback is valuable. So this is something that I used to really believe. I used to believe that all feedback is valuable. And I think to some degree it can be true in the sense of feedback can be telling of the person who's giving it, right? And, if someone gives you bad feedback, it can be valuable in the sense of it helps you realize they're not such a great person to be giving you feedback. But at the end of the day, all feedback is technically not valuable. There's a lot of garbage out there, all right? I've received feedback from people that I didn't want to be like, right? And it took me a really long time to work through it because at the time I was like, all feedback's valuable. I need to find a way to make this useful in myself. I need to find a way to apply this and make this relevant to me. But at the end of the day, this perception's wrong because it assumes that everyone is going to give good, qualified feedback. And what I mean by qualified is you're not going to take advice about, I don't know, how to run a marathon from somebody from My 500-Pound Life.
I knew you were going to say that.
Why'd you know that?
I just knew.
Just saying. If someone's never ran a marathon and doesn't, even leave their house half the time.
Bro, I bet she does know how to run a marathon now. The sisters, they're fire. Skinny queens.
We love them, shout out. But to my point, right? If I was sitting here and like I'm giving this advice on this podcast because I have copious experience with horrible bosses and intense corporate situations. Even when I had bosses that were good bosses, I would say, not like bad. They just, maybe it was like death by a thousand swords and they just didn't do much for my career or something like that. It was like a secret killer. Even when I had bosses like that, right? Like at the end of the day, I've had all of these work experiences and I also can relate to the fact that I am not an all-knowing expert. And there's still so many more bosses I'm going to experience in my life and so many more situations I'm going to experience in my life. But if I were to give you feedback on how to be, let's say, a better manager, I've also managed a lot of people. And so I know a thing or two. I'm not an expert. I haven't managed thousands of people, haven't been CEO yet, haven't done certain things yet. But I definitely know more than nothing. So what is the right mentality? Well, all feedback can have value, but only relevant feedback should be internalized. And what I mean by relevant feedback is it's somebody you want to be like, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say, little T, you want to be as funny as me, right? If I gave you advice, you're going to listen to me because you want to be like me. I get that, right? Natural little sister tendency. Another thing.
Guy.
Another thing is relevant feedback is going to come from somebody that's following some best practices. Now, it doesn't have to be like they're perfect. Nobody's perfect. Managers are not perfect. Even if you have a really, really good manager, you're going to catch them at bad moments, unideal moments, all of these different things. But what I mean is when you follow feedback best practices, you make it about the work. You don't make it personal. So you shouldn't be receiving feedback that's like, oh, you're lazy. That is personal feedback. That is not constructive feedback. Now, if you receive, every time we join a meeting, you have very low energy, you don't pay attention when I talk, you ignore me, you sometimes yawn. Now, that is very specific. In this specific situation, Lil T, I have recorded moments of this happening, right? And so if I give
I
you
know
that
you
feedback,
have.
I know if I give you that feedback, I'm not meaning it about you, right? There's nothing wrong with you. I'm just telling you the way you're showing up to certain things.
I'm
Could be better.
unmedicated, bro. What do you want from me?
I don't know, bro. We're both unmedicated. I mean, sometimes I'm
Maybe.
on my I dabble in the meds, but I don't.
I
I'm
don't.
not like I used to be. Yeah, I
Full
know.
send.
Full send. All right. Another thing too is just remember that most people aren't qualified, nor do they know how to give feedback, right? Not once there is no course that every manager has to take. A lot of managers don't even get training, right? So they don't know how to give feedback. They don't know how to keep it specific. They don't know how to do all these things. But at the end of the day, why would you take career advice from a bad person/manager? You wouldn't. So remember, you don't have to take all feedback into account. You can disregard feedback, especially if it makes you question who you think you are as a person and certain beliefs that you hold as a person. You don't need it. Another thing is, so how do we take action here? Well, one, determine if you want to be like your manager and evaluate the relevance of their feedback before your performance review or before you react to your performance review. Now, a lot of times you don't have a lot of time, like you react in real time. Typically, you fill out your performance review, the manager fills out their performance review, the manager consolidates it or HR consolidates it, they put it all into one document, and then you go into a meeting and you review all of it together. So you're caught off guard. You don't have a lot of time to, let's say, review what they said, to poke holes in it, to question it, all these things. But when you're in the moment getting feedback, the best thing you can do is keep quiet, let them get through everything they say. Don't get defensive. Don't start poking holes in specific arguments, right? Like if someone says you're always late to meetings and you've only been late to 2 meetings, you don't need to say, I've only been late to 2 meetings, all right? You don't need to pop in with that. You just let them keep going, take all the information in. I mean, no one's ever told me I've been late to meetings, but I for sure as hell have.
I'm talking about me. It sounds like me in a nutshell of
Lil T, you're...
don't PMO. Don't try and get mad. Don't. I'm perfect, awesome, and amazing.
Bro.
No, I know. I'm just saying that's something that I definitely do a lot.
Yeah, I know. Remember the chat we had last time where I was like, Lil T, it's not about you. It's about me and my feelings. Right? No. They're separate times. Well, anyways, don't overreact in the moment. Keep your cool. Even if they're saying some outlandish stuff, keep your cool.
Yes.
You will have, hopefully, some documentation, some formal feedback that you can walk away with. And then you can start to react. You don't always have to have a full reaction in the moment. You can say, hey, I need to take some time to think about this before I come back to you with more thoughts, or like I have questions or any of these things. You can ask them in the moment, but I think it's really important to remember, take a look at who your manager is, take a look at the quality of feedback you're getting. Remember that although it is a part of your career record, it's not the end of the world, even if it's bad feedback. And don't lose your cool. All right, Lil T, favorite part. Red flags time. Red flags.
Fire.
All right, number 1, red flag. And this one's pretty common. And this goes into like just managers don't know how to give feedback. But basically, vague or non-specific feedback. Good example of this, I've been told this many times. People find you difficult to work with. Or... facts. Now, I later found out that these were all lies, but that's beyond the point. If someone's telling you that people find you difficult to work with, or you don't work as hard as everyone else, you're not really given any good feedback, right? There's no specific examples, there's no guidance, there's nothing to do. So a good review should have clear and actionable feedback. If it's vague, it can be a sign of poor management or a setup for future blame. In my case, when I was told all these people found me difficult to work with, I called my manager's bluff. And I said, all right, let's go get them. Let's bring them in this room and let's just talk through it because I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Obviously, I called his bluff. It did not happen. And that's when I realized it was all lies. But obviously, most managers aren't going to be as crazy as some of the ones I've had. So I think if it's vague, sometimes it could just be because they're not great at their job. But at the same time, remember, it's a red flag for a reason. So keep your eye out, watch your back, see what's going on. Another red flag, all criticism and no recognition. So if they say, you're not meeting expectations, or you did all of these things poorly, you manage clients poorly, you email poorly, your meeting energy's poor, you suck, right? But they have no discussion of successes or strengths. This is a huge red flag for multiple reasons, right? Number one, a healthy review balance. Right. Yeah, a bit of a bully. But a healthy review balances both positive reinforcement with constructive criticism. So you don't always have to say, you suck at this. You can say, remember the time that you did it this way? You should always do it that way. So if your manager only focuses on the negatives, they might be trying to create more fear in you. They might be trying to keep you off balance, right? They might have a side agenda that you just want to keep your eyes out for. Mm-hmm. Another big red flag is there's a moving goalpost and unfair expectations. So I've had situations before where, companies have set targets for me, but they've never identified how to measure those targets. Mm-hmm. And so technically, if they don't agree on a source of truth for the target, they can just make up whatever they want as they go. And I'm just going to keep changing, my methods, my ways, just to try to hit something that's never going to be achievable. So if you hear something like, you didn't accomplish this, but whatever it was never actually discussed as a goal before, red flag. Throw it up on the play. Big red flag.
Oh, dang. Look at her. She thinks she's
right. Dude, I should get one of those yellow cards. Yellow card, red card.
She went to see one soccer game, guys.
Dude, I have seen so many soccer games. Are you kidding me? I'm dating a European.
In most recent times.
Football. So chill. Us real.
Triggering, but okay.
All right.
Shocking. Us real. As she comes from the smallest town in Texas.
Okay.
No, you didn't.
If the expectations keep changing without prior notice, it could just be a real sign for you that your leadership is disorganized, manipulative, and ultimately setting you up for failure. So keep your eye out. Another one is a lack of career development or growth conversations. So they might say something like, just keep doing what you're doing, with no discussion of future opportunities, of future success points, of opportunities to grow. And at the end of the day, this isn't a huge red flag. This is like an orange red flag, I'd say, on the lighter red side.
Orange red flag.
I don't know. It's like a blend in between the two.
Yellow?
Like a sherbet.
You should just say yellow, Miss Soccer Queen. Football Queen.
Whatever. All right. But if a company values their employees, they're going to discuss career trajectory. If they don't, then they may not see you as a long-term investment. So just keep that in mind, right?
Yeah.
All right. Another thing you might see in reviews is gaslighting or shift blaming. So I've had this happen to me so much. It's
gaslighting.
Yeah, gaslighting, man. It's more common than you think. I think shifting blame is also very common, right?
I do that.
Yeah, I think you could see it a lot. At the end of the day, it's like, let's say, for a gaslighting example here, let's say that you agreed on a plan with your manager on, let's say, one specific thing you were supposed to work on. Whether it's, I don't know, maybe it's like, be more positive, little T. And that was your feedback. And that was our goal, is for you to be more positive and specifically nice to your sister. Now, let's say in your annual review, they're like, well, Lil T, you were supposed to be nicer to your sister, even though I only told you, right? They're not going to say, I only told you to be positive, but they only said that. But they're going to be like, why weren't you nicer to your sister? We discussed this specifically. And once you have to
say, what am I, a mind reader?
Right. What am I? Well, you probably shouldn't say that, but you're thinking it. You're like, whoa.
That's what I'd say.
As soon as you have to question your own sense of reality, you are being gaslit, and you need to take a step back.
I probably would forget by then. I'd probably be like, yeah, honestly, you're probably right. I forgot.
And I think that's why it can be so tricky in the corporate workplace. This is why documentation is so freaking important, right? Because If you have documentation from your previous conversations, your manager's not going to get away with just saying, oh, I mentioned all of these things to you, right?
Paper trail.
No, you didn't. Here's my notes that I emailed you, right?
I forget to take the notes.
Getting in the habit of taking notes is a good thing.
I think another CEO finds me. They're going to be like, wow, easy gaslighter right here. We're just going to get her ass.
At the end of the day, if your leadership is contradicting previous feedback or they're making you doubt your own memory and work, it is a huge sign of manipulation, and you need to keep your eyes open because that company probably has a lot more issues than you're necessarily seeing at the front, right?
Yeah.
Another one is if there's just no clear path for improvement. So sometimes people will be like, oh, you need to do this better, but then they'll give you no guidance on how to improve. A good boss is going to help you improve. If they're just saying you're not good enough, they're not interested in developing you, right? I think another thing is they're just creating this arbitrary result of you should be doing these things better, you should be smarter. And it doesn't give you anything actionable, right? Feedback should be actionable.
Yeah, like you can change, make a physical.
Like you can change. You can do something next. Just saying you need to do better. I don't know. You need to do a better job slapping people's hands, Tara. A good manager is going to teach you. They're going to sit there and they're going to practice with you. All right. How do you slap the hand correctly?
Bro,
what is
I'd
a
kill
good
that
push?
I don't need no help in that.
All right. Well, you don't know that. We haven't talked to your manager.
We don't need to talk to my manager. Don't talk to her. She loves me.
Quick little feature.
Oh.
Okay.
No.
Another thing is, another huge red flag is if people weaponize constructive criticism. So let's say, a lot of times people might over embellish things other people said. I think at the end of the day, if your manager received feedback from other people, it's never going to be perfectly translated. But at the same time, it shouldn't be crazy, vague. So for example, let's say someone says like, oh, so-and-so complained about you, or people have had concerns with you, but there's no specifics and there's ultimately no opportunity to address the concerns. Gaslight Isha, basically.
Honestly,
right? Like
me personally, I think I'd kill it in the corporate world.
Random thought. All right. Why? Because you're going to weaponize constructive criticism? You're going to start a bunch of rumors?
Little nosy? No, I'd be like, who? What are you talking about? Is it about me? Who said that? Everybody listening. They tell me everything.
But you don't know that. Just so you know, people will smile right to your face in corporate America, and then they will backstab you regularly.
Yes, I do that a lot. That's what I did today.
Lil T, bragging about backstabbing is probably not something you should put at the top of your
okay, but it's not like it's not like intentional hurt.
Yes, I understand it's senior assassins, but still. I think you should not use senior assassins in the same demographic of corporate business.
I think I should.
Okay, well. Moving on. Okay. Another red flag is if you see some hostility or retaliation. Mm-hmm. Sometimes this can be, let's say there's a lot of ways this can take shape. Sometimes you might have a scenario where you have a manager that, for lack of better words, sucks. And they did something really stupid in a presentation. Sometimes they might come to you with feedback that's like, you ask too many questions in meetings, or you think too loudly, keep thoughts to yourself. And it's really just because they're insecure and they don't need someone smart poking holes in anything that they're doing. But at the end of the day, they're punishing you for having open communications, for sharing feedback, for sharing your ideas. So if your review is penalizing you for engaging or penalizing you for asking for help or even setting a boundary, culture may be toxic. Let's say you get feedback of you're never available during off hours, but you have a hard boundary where you do not work past 6 p.m. or 5 p.m., right? Yeah. You might have toxic culture right there. I've gotten feedback before that was basically shitting on me for asking for help. And it was like, a leader should know how to do these things. And I was like, Okay, but what do you, like, it doesn't make any sense. Enough to say a company was super toxic. So like the red flag was red flagging and I just, needed to walk through that light and see it. Another one, I've already mentioned this one, no documentation and a lack of transparency. If there is no written summary and there's zero involvement from HR. Now, I'm not saying they both have to be there 100% of the time. You don't need HR to be a part of your reviews. Frankly, you don't want them to be a part of your reviews. But if there's no written summary or there's no documentation, paper trail, typically when you send a review or you finish a review, you send it through a system that your HR has. Even if it's an Excel spreadsheet, even if it's a Word document, typically HR is going to keep record of these things. So if you don't have any of this stuff, there's no documentation, there's no paper trail, major red flag. If they're not willing to document it, it's because they want flexibility to change the story later. Right? Paper trail.
Yeah. Paper trail.
What's the number one thing we care about in business? Paper trail.
Paper trails.
Paper trails.
Awesome.
All right. And then the last red flag here, pretty common, is just overemphasis on loyalty and going above and beyond. Now, this is tied into boundaries. This is tied into some other stuff, right? But if you're already working extra hours, let's say, and they say something like, oh, we expect more commitment from you, or, oh, you're not doing the, above and beyond work. It's just kind of like, it's back to being vague. It's back to having unclear expectations. And more importantly, they're trying to exploit you. So keep these red flags in your back. You're never going to find a company that probably has none of them. Most companies maybe have one or two. But if you see a lot of these,
Run.
Potentially
Run.
time to take action.
Put it in 2 weeks, girl.
All right, Lil T. So to conclude this little episode we did here. So reviews are a mix of feedback, perception, politics, and opportunity. And that's important. Perception is key. It's not about facts. It's not like getting a grade in school and it's exclusively focused on the work you did. It is also focused on how you are perceived by your manager, by your peers, by other managers. And that's something that isn't just spoken for with your actions. It is how you present yourself. It's how you talk about yourself. And it's really how you push the public to see your eyes. The next thing is politics. Now, this can either be directly related to you or not directly related to you. There's a lot of cases where there's politics at a company. Let's say you have a really, really, really highly competitive environment, right? Some managers are required to review employees on a similar scale to colleges. So in college, you're supposed to have like a standard deviation. You got a couple people that fail. You got a lot of people that do okay and pass at a 70. And then you have a couple people with like 95, 100 grades, right? And there is an chill. I was the tryhard. There is an expectation, okay, that this curve always exists. So that's why certain classes that are super easy and you're like, how is this so easy? How are people failing these classes? Like, it's because people have to fail. There has to be failure or else professors get dinged. So remember those politics that happen, because there are some managers who have to rate their team on similar scales, and you could be incredible, but you're just on a really good team. And so you look not that great. And there's other politics to play into it, right? The bar is a little higher because of who you're surrounded by and your peers. Anyways, the biggest takeaway here is you have more control than you think. Document, right? Keep track of your success, promote yourself internally, talk about yourself, and get ready to kind of brag about Lil T.
What's good? And I love hearing that part.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Mommy.
And formal performance reviews shouldn't have big surprises in them. If there's a huge surprise in it, you likely have a bad manager that's not sharing regular feedback with you, or it's even possible that the feedback was manipulated by an insecure boss. Don't forget, not all feedback is valuable. Only internalize relevant feedback. If you have a bad manager, don't take career advice from them because you don't want to be like them.
Facts.
If you're early in your career, don't let this process intimidate you. Bring your receipts and make sure to ask questions. If you've been burned before, then you know how to read between the lines.
Facts.
But at the end of the day, toxic reviews often reveal more about the company culture than it does about your actual performance. So the next time you walk into a performance review, remember, this isn't just an assessment about yourself. It is also an assessment about the company too. Assess those red flags, see how the company is doing, and determine if you want to keep working there. All right, little T. Shall I add? All right, hold on. I put in a little closer here. If you like this episode, don't forget to rate, review, and share it with your favorite work friend. The one silently panicking before their next quarterly check-in is probably who we're looking for. And if you've gotten a wild performance review story or a horrible boss moment that you want to share, send it our way. Check us out at howtosurviveyourboss.com. We might feature it in a future episode. And that's that, little T.
Awesome. Peace and love.
Peace and love, everybody.